Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Nate. I'm the CEO of Next Reason. We provide seamless customer identity solutions, and I'm joined today by Haley Lovett. She's our principal solutions architect. So today we're discussing SAP CDC, which stands for the Customer Data Cloud, and specifically how you can maximize your CIAM platform. Are there business challenges that you're looking to meet and wondering if your current solution's the right fit? For example, is your engineering team spending more time on manual environment promotions and custom scripting for SAP CDC than they are on building new features? And if that's the case, you might be dealing with an innovation gap. So today we're not just talking about what SAP CDC does, we're talking about how to learn what its strengths are, how to recognize its challenges, and how to augment its capabilities in order to maximize your investment in customer identity. So getting into the current SAP CDC ecosystem, Haley, you've worked with a lot of global enterprises and implementations. So when we talk about implementations with CDC on this platform, where do those complexities actually show up?
Yeah, so when we look at like an SAP CDC integration, there's a few complexities or like hurdles that we tend to see. One is around UX and the ability to customize and extend that. The CDC native screen sets, it's great to have pre-built screen sets, especially if you want like low effort implementation options. But when you get into really complex solutions and you need to vary those by different brands or like per site, you want to start bringing in things like passkeys, which have a lot of different workflows you need to solve for, like password recovery and things like that. You start to run into some limitations with what CDC offers out of the box. Another area where we see sometimes a little bit of friction or difficulty is around the auditability. So, as we've seen the CIAM industry grow, also the need to remain compliant and like follow things like ISO, GDPR, go through SOC 2 audits or whatever your company's doing, becomes more and more important to do those things for the security and safety of your user identities. And so audit trail also becomes important, so like what changed when. So with CDC solution, there are some gaps around what's audited and for how long. So one is the difference between using user keys versus application keys to make API calls. So if you're using application keys, you're not going to get that same robust audit trail, which can be a problem for some of those M2M type calls. And then also if you're, one of the great things about the CDC solution is like it's been around for a long time. It was originally Gigia, so it has some like real longevity in the market. But that also means that some of the modern frameworks like OADC weren't natively built into the solution because they didn't exist then. So this kind of comes into play with the auditability as well. So if you're using CDC as your OpenID provider, there's going to be a limit to the audit trail for some of those OIDC actions. Also, the timeline of the audit trail is limited to a year, so that may not be sufficient depending on your industry. The other thing that we see is generally in the market, we're kind of seeing a shift from just straight B2C, business to consumer, to like more of a B2B2C model where you have like CIAM, partner identity and access management coming into play. So there's some limitations within how nested the like organizational hierarchy can be within CDC and what like self-service features might be available if you're kind of entering into more of a PIM model. And so that could also be like a bottleneck for you as well. And then the last point that we wanted to touch on, again, kind of generic, is the developer experience. So if we look at this move in the industry to configuration as code and being able to kind of deploy rollback version configs as well, there's not really a native built-in function like this within the CDC platform. So if you're looking to kind of reduce the manual effort and potential manual errors that occur as you're trying to move configs from like one environment, one site, one application to another, you're going to need to look at some creative ways to do that within the CDC platform.
Excellent. So when it comes to unpacking the current landscape of SAP CDC, what are the challenges are, we kind of get into three different paths. You can optimize what you have, You can start looking at other solutions, or you can plug in external systems and augment the current capabilities that you have. We're certainly not here to say you should leave the platform. I mean, we know very well, having worked with dozens of companies over the years, that your identity solution is very baked into your landscape with hundreds sometimes of different integrations and applications connected. And in our case, we have clients that are deeply integrated into the SAP ecosystem. There's the SAP Commerce Cloud, the SAP Marketing Cloud. The customer data piece is basically a part of that suite. And so therefore, staying connected holistically is maybe bringing a lot of value to you. So the question then becomes, how do you then bridge that gap if you have modernization goals? You mentioned something around passkeys and auditability. Can you talk a little bit about how to save yourself the time, the money, how do you reduce error, et cetera, in bridging that innovation gap that we talked about?
Yeah, totally. And it is super common to like want to augment the services that you get from your CIAM provider. Like every company's needs are different. Their customers' threshold for bringing on like, cutting edge features is going to be different as well. Individual security needs are different, all that stuff. So it's very common to augment the services. Very few customers are going to be happy with everything totally out of the box, especially as we look at that enterprise level customer. To address some of the specific issues we talked about. So when we look at limitations around screens and like the passkey solutions, there are some connectors such as OwnID that can provide some more robust passkey solutions and passkey workflows. So you can kind of just tack that onto the CDC solution there. If you're thinking about the kind of B2B2C CIAM model, if you want to build a more robust structure, you can kind of augment by building a service layer that looks at calls as they come in and makes some of that decision making and stores that that nested org structure yourself. And then when we look at additional add-ons, you could build like a dashboard add-on for partners to allow some more self-service. And we also talked a little bit about the limitations around the audit trail. So you can start, there's some changes to like how you architect your solution. So you could look at like, how am I making my API calls? What credentials am I using? Am I using application keys or user keys? So you can make some changes there at an architectural level that may or may not make sense depending on the number of calls and like what you're doing, but that's something you could look at. And then also, you can also export audit logs elsewhere to parse them, to store them longer, to kind of meet some of your compliance requirements. So there's some changes you could certainly make there that would improve that for you. And then I think the last thing we talked about was developer experience around the CI/CD pipeline and the promotion experience. So there are some open source tools out there. So there's a SAP CDC accelerator open source tool on GitHub that works to bridge that gap. There's also a Chrome extension that's called, I think, the CDC toolkit. So there's ways that you can definitely start looking at augmentation options that will allow you to track changes, version changes, roll back in a much more modern style.
Great. Well, so let's drill in even further. We have this other bucket or this other camp, which is the evolve camp. So for those customers who might be using the SAP platform today and are looking at other solutions, are looking to migrate, or they're looking to have CDC be a part of their wider SAP suite of tools, and they want to migrate onto the platform. Can you pick out a couple specific examples from the SAP CDC platform where customers might need to focus in on?
Sure. Yeah, totally. We talked about passkeys before. So even though we think that the direction of the whole industry is to go passwordless, we also know that the reality is like passwords are widely used and in most databases that we see today. And so one big consideration coming in or going out of any CIAM vendor is the passwords and hash compatibility, and can we bring in old passwords? So CDC does support importing users with a variety of existing hashes. I think the only thing to keep in mind is that The default password hash used in the CDC landscape is, I have it written down here, the PBKDF2 SHA-256. So it's going to, any user that's migrated in, as soon as they log in, it's going to rehash in that password hash, and any new user created is going to have that password hash. So if you're migrating in, that's just a consideration to understand. If you're migrating out, you just want to verify that your new provider is going to support that hash for you. There's lots of solutions also. If that doesn't blend, you can do like what we call a just-in-time migration, where users do a password change or migration at that time, or you can do a full password reset. So not insurmountable, but something to consider always. And then again, another consideration kind of with CDC or with any migration is the current data schema. So in the CDC structure, there's essentially 3 components to their user profile data. It's the data, the profile, and the preferences. So the profile piece of the user data is a standard fixed set of attributes. It's going to be stuff like first name, last name, like real standard things across all platforms. Data is another component that's going to be really extensible. So that might include arrays. And this is where mapping can get very tricky. If you're going out, does the new system accept that? If you're coming in, how do you map in your existing data into the schema that CDC offers? And then the last component is the preferences. And consent and preferences is always typically like pretty proprietary. So the format that you're going to need to store those in for CDC is going to probably look different than how you have them today. So there's just going to be some architectural, data, security, other considerations to make with your teams around really what data needs to get moved and what data can be left, or what needs to change.
This is a good time to mention that if you're currently mapping out your identity roadmap for the year, we've put together an SAP CDC capability and augmentation matrix. You can find the link in the description, and you can see how your current setup stacks up against modern industry benchmarks. Thanks, Haley. So why don't we talk a little bit about the Next Reason methodology? We've been around since about 2017. We have teams in the US, Brazil, and the Philippines, which allows us to cover multiple time zones. And over that time, we've built up our arsenal of identity architects, engineers, operations, et cetera. We're a very security and compliance first company. This has to do with SOC 2 Type 2 compliance, ITIL certifications, being experts in OAuth 2, OpenID Connect, and other identity standards, and of course, GDPR and compliance rules around that. We've migrated hundreds of millions of user records over the years, worked in several countries of origin, and have a 24/7 global team ready to support you. One of the advantages that you get by working with Next Reason is our strong network. So we've been around for a long time. We have strong partnerships. We are CIAM platform agnostic, meaning that we partner with Auth0 and Okta, SAP, with Log and Radius, Talus. Really, we're on the customer side. We want to ensure that the solution and the optimization or augmentation strategy that they have works for them. We are very customer-centric, and we have a team of people that work around the clock to support you where you are. I sometimes get asked where it is that Next Reason fits into the picture when it comes to these types of strategies. So when it comes to optimization or evolution, migration, et cetera, oftentimes a CIAM platform is very configurable and easy to use, and therefore, why would you need a third party like us to help? Let's talk about a migration, for example, from start to end, the whole life cycle. It really starts with strategy. What is it that you're trying to do? Is it an optimization strategy? Is it an augmentation of implementing passkeys? And then there's sort of a planning stage, selecting a vendor, selecting a platform, optimizing the current solution, et cetera. That only accounts for 25–30% of the project. Before you get into integration across your applications, migrating data, onboarding your various applications, launching, and then of course, ongoing support. Next Reason supports you in this entire life cycle. Whether you're plugging us in at the very beginning or somewhere in the middle, or even after you've launched, we're on your side. We cover you in all of those areas. All right, so Haley walked us through a number of strategies and options that you have, whether it's a migration to or from SAP CDC, whether it's augmenting or optimizing the current solution. The takeaway really is, don't let your current CIAM platform be the reason your digital transformation is being slowed down. There are a ton of options for you to augment your existing service or to optimize it. And one of the things that we're doing as a result of these webinars is we offer a limited number of free CIAM modernization assessments. These are assessments that Haley and I are personally involved in. I'll put up our contact information here so that you can reach out to us directly, or you can fill out the contact form on our website. Every customer identity landscape is a little bit different. It's very unique to you and your requirements in your landscape. And so we've talked at a pretty high level here. If you really want to ask very specific questions or get into some of the details, don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to jump on a 20-30 minute call and just talk about some of those challenges. With that, I want to thank you all for joining, and thank you so much for Haley for joining us and sharing some of your expertise. See you next time.